Okay.
Hey everybody, it's Billy O here with another episode of Huns History. It's Memorial Day 2021. And before we get into um, uh, what we're going to talk about with Huns legend Brian Welborn, I just want to say, hug a veteran out there. Uh, this is an important day. A lot of people gave their lives so that we could be talking about rugby and barbecue and beer and whatever else we're talking about today. Uh, Again, today's guest is Brian Welborn. Brian, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks, Bill.
You posted something on Facebook today about a friend of yours that passed that was a veteran. You want to talk about him for a quick second?
Yeah. Our good friend that me and a bunch of my friends I grew up with and went to school with, we lost a friend, Mark Fitzgibbons. Um, Unfortunately, he was 82nd Airborne and made it through his duty and got back home and wasn't able to carry the burden of his service when he'd gotten back home. And so I just want to let everyone know that whose family's military, who's lost people and loved ones that are military, that we're all thinking about you today, and we're all holding hands and sharing our hearts together with our military and the ones we've lost. So big shout out to everybody today.
That's a tragedy that a lot of people don't pay attention to. Military suicide is huge. And it's something that we can all be more aware of. Type A male suicide, quite frankly, is huge after people quit playing sports or retire from business, or like you're talking about the military for men. It's a real deal. So that's something we can all be aware of. Let's talk about something a little more positive, which is the Huns this year. We went 5-2. We swept the Blacks. We beat the Reds in the home and away series by a bonus point. One win each. Did the same thing with Rugby HTX. And the only D1 match we played with the Quins, we won. That puts us at the top of the table, doesn't it? Why don't you talk about this season a little bit?
It does. Yeah. I mean, even with kind of an impromptu competition, we were grateful that we finally got to have the season open up and salvage what we could of the Union season. But it's a big thing to be able to boast it that we went through the TRU and ended number one. With the Reds and the Blacks are always two quality, top nation sides. So to be able to get over on those two teams is a big deal for any club.
Almost nobody beats the Blacks even once. Beating them twice in a season's an accomplishment.
Absolutely. I mean, you think back on the last time that the Huns beat the Blacks twice in one season, we went on to win the national championship. So that just kind of gives credence to the standard that they're at,
And both matches at Burr ended up very close and came down to a fly half making a big kick or two. It kind of proves that no matter how good your team is, sooner or later you're going to rely on a big kick. And both those games, I thought Alex Reese played a great game with his kicking and field management. What was it, like 2 or 3 weeks ago? I was really happy to see us beat the Blacks twice. That's an accomplishment.
Yeah, big time. And, Reese has definitely grown up and evolved a lot in his leadership role, but also got to tip my hat to Corey Jones and John Little and Phil Hansen, JP Novak. We were lucky to have some veteran guys that had kept the boots on this year and really pushed our leadership roles through beyond expectations this year.
And some new people. You had Red Patrick Coleman come in. He's a real good ball runner from the scrum and a good thrower in the lineouts, very tough on tackling. A lot of our scholarship stuff with sevens is paying off. Jacob Gopner, who's a sub, Cesar Escajeda, who played, the whole year. I mean, there were a lot of scholarship kids that contributed. Nicholas, I can't pronounce his last name, Greek background, really long last name with a lot of consonants.
Super tough kid too.
Well, and that first Blacks game, we had a bunch of kids, new look Huns. There's only 4 guys left on the field from when we voted to appeal relegation 3 years ago. Biff, Phil, JP, Zach, all scrummies. Everybody else playing is new. And you got a couple of young guys playing in their first D1 men's match, and it's against the Blacks. And they played like their hair was on fire.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, it's this season was really started off with a lot of question marks. I mean, us and pretty much everyone else in the country had just gotten a forced year and a half off. So the big deal was how we were going to pick up the pace, when they allowed us to open trainings, which we started as soon as they allowed anything, any kind of organized trainings to start, and just were constantly pushing, what was allowed with trainings and moving forward. And to see those young guys take limited practice schedules and limited, capabilities of training and continue to evolve as men's level player was a great thing to watch. Because as happy as everybody was to get out and play some rugby this year, it was definitely one of the most challenging years because of the pandemic to pick up and create a structure that was going to build a successful rugby team.
You know what impressed me as a fan, just watching, and I watch most of the games are broadcast on an iPhone in real time. So I'm watching this blurry thing on my computer. I end up watching the high def stuff later in the week that you guys watch. But the scrum, especially around the goal line, played a lot smarter. When we were near the goal line, the pick and go patience and aptitude was amazing. It was like once we got there, it wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when we were going to score. We didn't get pushed around in scrums, and we really did well in lineouts. Those things were very impressive to me. I know you're the scrum coach. What did you think about those three areas of play?
I agree with everything you just said. I definitely we played a lot of very clinical rugby this year that was just beautiful to watch. And as a coach, I mean, that's really what makes it easy to come out, is when you can see guys buying into the system and the hard work being there, and you can just stand back on Saturday and watch the players, lift their game on the individual level and mainly on the team level as well. We started out with kind of a limited coaching staff when it came to forward specific coaching this season. We had a huge lift when a fellow Huns legend, Jack Bloom, joined the coaching staff, and really allowed us to add dimension to how we were running our trainings with the forwards. And that allowed us to split our forward trainings into Jack Bloom and Andrew Hay and Ryan Bukowski taking over on the sled and the technical scrum work, and allowing me to focus mainly on line out play. And I believe that allowed us to spend a lot more time and detail on those set pieces. And man, just to watch this crew improve every single week, not just with the lineouts, but with the scrums and with the strategy of the 5-meter scrum and turning it into slow ball train. I mean, it wasn't just being good at one thing this year. It was watching these men be good at a lot of things at once. So that's as a coach, man, you can't ask for much more.
Adam said the same thing, that Jack came out and really added a lot to the scrum coaching. I'm a scrummy. I was a lineman in American football. My high school football team ran the ball. We might pass the ball once a game.
Yeah.
We ran a few basic plays like the old Green Bay Packers, and no one can stop us. And when you watch that train around the goal line, it's the same feeling of, we're going to jam this ball right down your throat, and there's nothing you could do about it. And I'm at home yelling at the TV, the dog's hiding under the couch. I mean, it was amazing.
Yeah.
So we're talking basically.
It's fun to watch the oh, sorry. Go ahead.
It's fun.
I was going to say, it's fun to watch the wide open, ESPN highlight reel tries, but there's nothing better to afford than watching a slow, confident, demoralizing train try. I mean, it's not the most entertaining, but if you know how much work it takes as a forward and how much confidence it takes, I mean, man, that's the best thing to see, because that just pulls the soul out of your opponent.
And it also lifts your backs up. I think what we're really talking about here is something that I'm going to now segue to the backs. I saw a lot of improved scrum IQ this year, offensively, defensively. We weren't just great athletes anymore. We were playing smart rugby. And that happened in the back line too. I think that Alex and Corey combined really controlled and directed the backline play so that the young studs like Brandon Johnson, Nick, and what a great surprise for the mullet of the year, Sean Lemasters at wing. I mean, seriously, we played really smart rugby. That Blacks game, we made some mistakes, the second Blacks match, but that was very clinical from the backs as well, kicking for field position, things like that. And, you know, to win that type of a rugby game at Burr when it mattered really shows to what you're talking about as far as guys buying into the system.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you got to chalk that back line play and the open play up to Adam Scheidler. I mean, he's really, you know, put his heart and his time and effort into developing this system and the structure of rugby that he saw and thought would be best for this club. And for the last 3 years, he has just been hammering it into these guys. And when you see everyone connect on it at the same time, you know, like we did this year, it really is a beautiful thing. And you start seeing how what a team sport and how important that group flow is for a quality rugby team. You can have the best athletes in the world, but if you don't have 23, 15 guys on the field at once that have bought into the same structure, you're going to struggle. I don't care who you are. So I think that made it easier on us this season, is that Adam Scheidler put together a great playbook, and the guys trusted it and the guys bought into it and they worked hard to make it to execute it perfectly.
What was the score in the D2 Quins game?
It was similar to the first game. It was a lot to a little. I mean,
So,
I want to say somewhere around 50, 55-10.
So on top of everything we're talking about with D1, the last 3 D2 matches, they ran the Reds, the Blacks, and the Quins right off the field.
Yeah.
And for me, the recruiting, which started with a few 7 scholarships, I would hope that this sends a message to college kids that aren't quite at the MLR level, but that are still really good rugby players. They can come to Austin and there's no clicks on the Huns, and they can get plugged in and have a chance to play D1 rugby and win at a high level right away. I would hope. I mean, we beat an all-star team in Houston, the Rugby HTX. And so I'm hoping this builds our recruiting program. What do you think?
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, if you go back to 2017 and in the launch of the MLR in 2018, you know, I think everyone would be hard pressed to find an amateur club that's put more players into the MLR than the Austin Huns. This year, we've already mentioned him. Patrick Coleman got signed, and he wasn't a player that came to Austin looking to play for the Austin Gilgronis. He came to Austin looking to play for the Austin Huns, and he developed and worked on his game and ended up by the end of the season with a contract with the Austin Gilgronis. And that's absolutely a main part of our purpose, and one of the greatest achievements we can do as a club is bring in players, develop them in our system, and prepare them to go to the next level of rugby, you know, and we've been doing that successfully since the start of the MLR. And like I said, I would challenge to name another club that's done it better than us.
College coaches, young people just graduating from college, pay attention to what Coach Welborn just said.
Absolutely.
Come to Austin and we'll help you get into professional rugby.
Yeah. And you know, now, we're gonna build on those 7 scholarships, like you've mentioned. That's been one of our best recruiting tools that we've had in a long time. We've had many guys that have come in on that 7 scholarship, and we've retained them through union and through years with the Huns. Guys like Austin Vandiver, Ricky Chestnutwood, Alex Reese, Caesar. That 7 scholarship has been one of our biggest tools in bringing in new talent. And our plan is to
Jacob
Gopner. I mean, list goes on, you know. And like I said, that's something that we're excited about. We're going to build on it. We're going to grow that program, as well as see what else we can do as far as, you know, possible scholarships for developing coaching and stuff like that. So seeing the success in that is only making us more excited to build it and grow it and not let it stagnate.
Wow. All right. So 2021, great year for the Huns. You know, everybody's going to be a little bit stronger next year, so we need to continue to grow. But I want to go back and rewind a little bit for some perspective on this. first of all, in the spring and fall of 1972, when Pat Lockridge late that year formed the Huns, in the spring and the fall, it was only the Austin Rugby Club. Their first side was the Blacks. They're basically equal. Second side with a separate coach was the Golds. They used to have these huge, wide black and gold striped jerseys.
Yep.
And
I remember we wore them in high school.
I'm told practices were brutal. And the Golds, captained by Pat Lockridge, won the Austin tournament in the spring and the Houston tournament in the fall. And Pat had had enough, wanted to form his own team, went off to Argentina, came back with the first Huns jerseys, the jerseys we wear now, basically, and formed the Huns. And he had a few of his guys with him, but he had to rebuild. So I know before I started playing in 75, they still beat the Blacks a couple of times. And in late 75 and maybe 78 at the Houston tournament, my teams beat them twice. Then we dropped down to D2 and never beat them again until 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. Now, you joined the club in what year?
2009. 2009 was my first season. I only played half a year, half a season though.
So you're retired this year. So you played for the Huns for 11 years.
Yeah.
When you started, we were still a Division II club, yes?
Yeah. My first season, we did not field a D1 team. D2 was the highest division we had.
And then at some point soon thereafter, the club made a move back up to Division I, correct?
Yes. I believe it actually was 2009 that we moved up to Division I.
So the club was D2 for 30 years or longer, some really long period of time. About the time you started, the boys said, we're gonna move up. And you guys built up and became a middle of the pack D1 team, and they've sent several teams to the playoffs back then. So we had some playoff games for the national championship. Did we ever get out of the first round back then?
No, we didn't.
But we played some good playoff rugby.
Yep, we did, and we definitely had some tight matches with teams that historically had been playing way over the level that we were coming into at that point. But back then, also the Red River was allowed 4 teams into the round of 32. So it was usually, the Blacks were on top. And then, those bottom 2 teams had to travel to either Denver or Kansas City and play, a 1 seed or a 2 seed. So what it did was it definitely forced us to earn our stripes and we took our lickings, but it also allowed us to see what the standard of rugby was that we were aspiring to. So, without games like that and without those hard seasons, I don't know that we would ever been able to digest and visualize what it was we were actually after, what we were trying to build.
There were only 32 D1 teams last year or in 2019 left. It'll be interesting to see how many are left nationwide after COVID. But I heard that Kansas City game and road trip were epic.
Yeah. I'd be surprised if they even let the Huns back in Kansas City. Don't tell Hansel I said that.
So fast forward to 2017. Chris Bouguet, along with Thierry Dopin, negotiated with the board of directors to allow those 3 to manage the Huns D1 side and still participate in both Texas Rugby Union, USA Rugby, and then in this separate competition with the Glendale Raptors and the Utah Warriors. Mm-hmm. You were on that team, a little bit controversial to some because those gentlemen brought in a lot of outside players. The first pro league had folded, so there were a lot of high-level players available. They recruited them, brought them in. I'm assuming they gave them a stipend and housing. And that team was pretty badass. You agree? I mean, I know you won the national championship, but just talk about the team.
I think that's an understatement.
Great coaching.
Yeah.
But one of the things I want to explore with you really quickly is that a lot of people put an asterisk on that season, and I think it's bullshit because
Yeah.
In addition to some players they brought in to fill a couple positions, there were a lot of core Huns still on that team that contributed. You, your brother Craig, Zappa,
Robert Drummond, John Little, Phil Hansen,
Fitzgerald,
Andy Novick, Timothy Fitzgerald. And I mean,
JP
Kyle
came.
Breidenbach, Sonny Taylor, Lamani Tongo Tongo, those were all players that had been playing with the Huns previous to the HRM year.
But even Aaron Bone, and
Yeah.
one of the best games that I saw all year was that second Blacks match. And Hale was filling in at wing because of some injuries. And Hale broke his nose in the first half. Came on the sideline, had him straighten it out, put some cotton back in his nose, and went back in. I know Heller made an appearance or two. There were a lot of Huns that contributed to that. And anytime anybody got hurt, they had to come back and play Division II to get eligible on the Huns to work their way back up to the first side. That's point number one. Point number two is that it was the USA Rugby competition. And quite frankly, point number three is we still played by the rules. I mean, those were the rules of USA Rugby. So I think you would agree that anybody that hangs an asterisk on that year was bullshit.
Yeah, and I think really maybe the biggest thing to that is that we were a team that was relatively unheard of at that point. And what our general goal was to do was to recreate not only the player development systems, but the financial systems and the financial resources that the teams like Golden Gate and Nyack and Belmont and the Blacks had been operating with, for 20 years before we won a national championship.
Yeah, they did all the same thing for years.
Maybe what the distaste with some people was about our squad was that we were unheard of and that we took their system and we did it perfectly the first year we did it. And there wasn't one team before us that won a national championship that didn't have coaches on contract, that didn't have players on contract. So to say we did anything different than anybody else is utter bullshit. They just didn't want to see us do it and do it all the way to the end. They didn't want to see the Huns do it. That was the only thing that they want to hang their asterisks on. But we, fuck, man, we got plenty of gold medals and a trophy says we did it just the same as everyone else who's hung that gold. And, we're one of the only teams in Texas to do it. Since 1984, we're the only team in Texas to do it.
Hey, dude, I went to the
haters are going to hate.
I went to the quarterfinals, semifinals, and finals.
Mm-hmm.
Pat unfortunately passed a day or two before the game, so we were able to dedicate the game to him.
Since we've referenced him twice and I've got your ear, man, I would just like to drop a little bit more about Pat Lockridge. Pat Lockridge was my first rugby coach, one of my first rugby coaches, along with Al Neese and Mark Hernandez for the Austin area high school team. And, inevitably over the years, became a friend of mine as much as a rugby mentor. And, when we show the team photo from the night we won that national championship, our banner says Pat Lockridge, number 7. And I hope his family knows, and I know he's looking down on the fields of rugby all over the world and knows that his name will always be echoed in the legendary volumes of Texas rugby and beyond. I definitely owe a lot of my career to Pat Lockridge, being that I've only played on teams that Pat Lockridge started. So when we mention him, I just want to reiterate, how important he was to everything that's going on in rugby, even today and after his time.
Dude, amen. I've told you my story about meeting Pat Lockridge jogging at the Mural Fields, and he stuck me in at second row. I'm so old, I played with Al Neese.
Yeah.
Did he ever get permanent fake teeth, or does he still take his fake teeth
that's
out?
his favorite joke, is to pull out his teeth,
Al Neese is one of the
much so we almost bought him a damn joke book just so we'd have some fresh material.
Al Neese is one of the characters of Texas rugby and a good man. I played with him on select sides and against them with the Blacks for years. But, that meant so much to me. I was kind of taking a sabbatical from a stressful job and wasn't at a really good spot in my life. And watching the resurgence of the Huns was incredible. Now, moving on, that season also divided our club a little bit. And then in the following year, some guys went pro, left our club. Some guys went to San Marcos. We lost our coach. And we basically were playing D1 rugby with a D2 side. I think we got one win, two ties, and the rest losses. But we started focusing on old boys community culture rugby, continuing at a club level to build our finances from the board of directors that you're talking about. We started offering these 7 scholarships. That first year, really bad. You guys voted to appeal relegation. Next year, we were 500. 2018, we came in second place, only lost to the Blacks. We beat the Reds 3 times that year.
Yeah.
And this year, we're at the top of Texas. Now, you're a coach now. You hung up your boots. But that's a pretty quick resurgence in a pretty short period of time.
It is, and also, and kind of being able to really understand what happened from 17 to 18 is, you almost had to be right in the middle of it to know what really happened there and what that transition was about, and I never saw it, and I don't believe the majority of the clubs saw it as losing anything. We did what we set out to do. We set out to do 2 things. That was win a national championship and put as many players into the pro Austin team as possible. And we were absolutely successful on both of those accounts. Now, when you make big systemic moves like that, there's always going to be growing pains, and there's going to be some, stressful personalities that go involved with that. And I felt like we handled it the best way anybody in that position could. If anything, it just pays credence to the culture of the Austin Huns community and the brotherhood. And there was nothing that was going to stop us from moving forward. It's a hard stab to the heart when you go from a national championship year to the next year being asked to relegate down to Division II. And that didn't happen because we just fell off the map. It happened because we put so many players into the pro league. We had to develop new pro level players, and that's what we've done. So it's easy to say, if everything's not perfect, and maybe it was a challenging year, but the way I saw it, and I believe the way a lot of people saw it, was, despite some of the hardships, despite some of the burnt bridges, personally, I think the Huns Rugby Football Club did exactly what they planned to do, and I don't think they could have done it any better.
That's an outstanding way to look at it. I've talked to a lot of people about this, and I have a spin on it in a way that's very similar, in that whatever rift there was and whatever bridges were burned, and then a tough season, an awful lot of people got motivated to participate in leadership that might have otherwise stood on the sidelines. Hansel, Wheezy, Adam, you, your brother, myself, Biff growing as a leader on the field, Phil,
big time,
going from third row to prop at a pro level, and then becoming a leader on the field, recruiting. I mean, so many people have helped build a foundation around this club so that our players and coaches could excel. And I do think that came out of the crucible of that whole situation.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. And just to add another kind of, challenging factor in the middle of that, we lost a great friend and rugby brother in Mike Martin. And,
man,
so one thing that I think binds this club together that makes it special over a lot of other competitive clubs is that it's not just the wins and the numbers on the scoreboard that join the members of this club. It's a calling to something bigger than ourselves, and it's a brotherhood, and it's a family that we, from Division I to Division III to the Horde to the Silverbacks to the coaching staff, that we all buy into. We're here to do our best for the Huns Rugby Club, and then to bring something out of it for ourselves once we've put it in for the club. But I just tip my hat to the clubs, the Huns RFC. I mean, without the culture that we've been building here since '72, I mean, none of this would have been possible. If you look at when I first joined, we were practicing at Burnett Middle School on concrete, and Kurt Tate was my first head coach here with the Huns, and I watched him in a short number of years take a rugby team that was used to 20 to 30 players maybe at training to having 50, 60, 70 players at training, and not just players coming in and out, but players that were committed to this club and saw this club as a family. And so even though I've only been with the club 25% of its lifetime, man, we've seen massive change, and really I think what the center of that is the family culture that the Huns have made their own over the last 4 decades.
I could not agree with you more, man. That is very well said. And I just want to, not that you missed them, but the old boys are a big part of that, all the way down, like you were saying, through the horde and everybody. There's 70 something old boys that are dues paying members. I know it's a calling to me. I probably spent 20 hours a week working on Huns business for the last 3 or 4 years. Can't imagine how many hours Wheezy and Hansel have put in over that period of time, doing administrative work, Wheezy out there repairing motors and engines at the field, et cetera. So it's a calling to a lot of people. And I do think that makes us different. A fan of both clubs that I've known since the 70s, early 80s, told me the other day that for all the Blacks' success internally, they can be cliquish. And that's not to be a negatively critical. It's just to say that's how those guys have kind of grown over time. Whereas the Huns have always been a huge family and have stuck together. And this individual thought that's why we weathered COVID so well. I don't know. But another thing I wanted to compliment you on that I forgot earlier about this year's team is that in addition to rugby IQ and technical improvement and game management and all that stuff, I thought we were a lot more physical this year too, even being undersized. And Johnny Herron told Adam that he thought we were the most physical club this year in Texas.
Yeah.
And I thought Dallas was the most physical club in Texas. So that's a hell of a compliment coming from Johnny Herron. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, when Johnny compliments your club, that goes straight to the heart. I mean, he's such a stellar player, and the Reds have really been a strong, just, big, tough rugby team to play. And we have a really good relationship with the Reds, but man, we both limp off the field when those games are done. So, I'd like to kind of, push the credit for that to the player leadership on the field, and where that comes from is how your players train. If they're not, if they don't have the kind of leadership that's pushing them to drop their shoulders and get, mean with their buddies during training, then we don't get any better. You know what I'm saying? So, having player leadership that pushes grit on the practice field is how you get it on Saturday. You can't brother-in-law and coddle each other Tuesday and Thursday and then expect to come out and crack skulls on Saturday. You got to do your skull cracking Tuesday and Thursday, and coaches can't do that. Player leadership does that for you.
That's awesome, man. All right, one last question. You got one night to live and you're going to go out partying. Who's your wingman? Drummond, Mike Montgomery, or Zappa?
Robert Drummond.
Why?
Oh man, that's the third twin. Right, Robert Drummond's been my right-hand man since I was 8 years old, man. I wouldn't go into battle with anybody else.
Strong words from a Huns legend and current scrum coach Brian Welborn. Anything else you want to say? Anything else you want to say before we wrap this up?
Man, I just want to thank you for letting me take part in this today, Bill. And I just want to thank the Huns and all of our fans and the Hall of Fame committee and the social membership, the old boys, our new young guys that are coming in on 7 scholarships this season that are going to have their first experience with the Huns RFC.
Austin Beer Works.
Austin Beer Works always. They keep our goalposts covered and they keep our post matches loose and limber. And I just want to let everybody know, come out for 7s. We're we're going to be building on everything we did this 15 season and keep moving forward and upward.
And you college kids that might watch this, come to the Huns, play in some big games, and hopefully next year we'll be back in the national tournament at the end of the year.
Absolutely agreed.
All right, Brian, thanks very much for doing this. Huns.
Up to Hans. Thank you, Bill.